President Biden hosted the leaders of Canada and Mexico at the White House on Thursday, the first summit of its kind since 2016. The talks included the economy, climate change, and migration. CBS News' Skylar Henry has more from the White House.
President Biden welcomed Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Mexican President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador to the White House. The president first met with each leader one-on-one.
It's an honor to welcome our two closest neighbors to the White House today.
Then all three sat down together for the first North American Leaders Summit since 2016. Economic cooperation is at the top of the agenda for the group sometimes referred to as the Three Amigos.
We have to drive an inclusive economic recovery.
Another major topic is the COVID-19 pandemic.
We have to end the pandemic and to take decisive actions to curb the climate crisis.
Canada has raised concerns over the proposed tax credit for American-made electric vehicles, a provision in the president's Build Back Better bill.
The electric vehicle tax credits is an opportunity to help consumers in this country.
U.S. officials have said the three leaders wouldn't center their talks around border policy. Instead, they're using the summit as an opportunity to lock arms to mitigate the root causes of migration. Skylar Henry, CBS News, the White House.
For more, I want to bring in CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes. Nancy, always good to talk to you. So as we heard, economic cooperation was at the very top of the agenda. It's no wonder, given that the U.S. faces supply chain issues. So tell us, Nancy, what are these three leaders actually trying to work out?
Well, the supply chain was definitely at the top of the agenda for all of them. They're all facing some of the same challenges. And of course, the economies of these three countries are so intertwined. Beyond that, more generally, they were just trying to reestablish the strength of this unique trilateral relationship. We hadn't seen a summit like this, after all, in about 5 years. So this was a chance for them to reconnect, reassert that alliance. And then beyond that, every country kind of came into this meeting with their own big priorities. For Mexico, for example, the president wanted to talk about the fact that Mexico needs access to more vaccines. There were issues that he had with U.S. immigration policies that he wanted to bring up. For Canada, they have big concerns about a provision in the Build Back Better Act, which is very soon to be voted on, most likely by the House, that would provide tax credits for people who buy U.S.-made electric vehicles. The Canadians feel that that violates a trade agreement between the three countries. The White House does not see it that way. And when he was speaking in the Oval Office, President Biden told reporters that that was one of the things that they were going to be talking about today.
Nancy, I want to come back around to one of the things that you said, which was that President Obrador of Mexico was also very interested in immigration. How did the leaders address that question?
You know, we don't really know, because publicly they did not say much about it. They sort of glossed over it, and it's not that surprising. This is, you know, as we talked about, the first time that they're meeting in quite a while, and this is an issue that can be divisive, an issue on which the three countries don't necessarily see eye to eye. And so while they may have discussed it behind closed doors, out in the open, they really did not make mention of it. The White House really downplayed the immigration issues going into this summit. But there are big open questions. You know, what is the U.S. going to do about the Remain in Mexico policy? What is it going to do about the use of Title 42, which is a justification for sending migrants back to Mexico because of the pandemic? Those are the kinds of questions that went unanswered in public today, in part because these leaders decided not to hold the traditional trilateral press conference that we normally see after these big summits, where we're able to ask them those kinds of thorny questions.
Well, obviously, Nancy, we're also awaiting a vote from Congress on the president's social spending and climate bill. Tell us, what's the latest?
Well, the latest is that Democratic leaders in the House are still hoping to have a vote as soon as possible. They had vowed to wait until they got the final analysis from the Congressional Budget Office about how much revenue this bill was going to raise and how much it would add to the deficit. And the news is just out that according to these nonpartisan congressional budget crunchers, it would add a few $100 billion to the deficit. That's not great news for Democrats. They were hoping that it would show that this would essentially be revenue neutral, that it would raise a lot of money, it would cost a lot of money, and at the end it would kind of be a wash. And so now the question is, those moderate Democrats, a small cadre of them who had been holding out until they got these numbers, are those numbers going to spook them? Or will they be okay to vote for this package, knowing that it is obviously going to have to get tweaked in the Senate where it needs to be revenue neutral? And so, they go ahead and say, we don't think it's perfect, but we want to keep the ball rolling. We're right up against the Thanksgiving break. We don't want to lose momentum. And they'll go ahead and vote for it and just make sure that it gets tweaked in the Senate. That's what we're watching to see right now.
And we always expected that was ultimately going to happen, but interesting now that we have the scoring of those numbers. Hey, Nancy, before I let you go, I want to ask you about something that the president also said, that he's considering a boycott of the Winter Olympics in Beijing. Tell us what's behind this and how likely is that to actually happen?
Right. So he was sitting there in the Oval Office with the Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau when he was asked by a reporter whether he was considering doing a diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Olympics. And he said, yes, that is something that is under consideration. So this sparked a lot of curiosity. What exactly would a diplomatic boycott entail? Would that just involve U.S. officials not going to the Olympics, or are we talking about athletes as well, which would be a huge deal? We didn't get many more answers when we followed up with the White House press secretary, Jen Psaki, who said that this is all still being discussed, that she's not going to get out ahead of national security officials who are talking through all of this. And, of course, these are two countries that have, disagreements on a whole range of issues. The U.S. Is unhappy with China because of its military buildup, because of human rights offenses, trade issues. I could sort of go on and on. So the question is, will the White House determine that it is that holding out on the Beijing Olympics, which obviously China is deeply invested in those games going off well, would that be enough of an incentive to sort of force China to change its ways in a couple of different areas? And so we're watching right now to see how far the White House wants to take this.
Yeah, a lot of questions prompted from that comment, especially given that President Biden was meeting virtually with President Xi of China just earlier this week. Never a dull day, Nancy. Thank you.
You got it.